In the heart of Wyoming, a lonely rancher and his loyal German shepherd stumble upon a mystery buried for generations. A secret hidden beneath a waterfall, a truth powerful enough to change their lives, and perhaps to heal two broken souls. Before we get started on his journey, please take a few seconds to hit that subscribe button, and let me know in the comments, where are you watching tonight? Chapter 1. The Bark Beneath the Storm. The storm had rolled in from the north without mercy, dragging sheets of rain that blurred the mountains into gray ghosts. Wind howled through the pine line, rattling the old boards of Ethan Miller's cabin like the earth itself was angry. Inside, the small ranch house glowed faintly under the trembling light of a kerosene lamp. The air smelled of wet wood and coffee gone cold. Ethan sat by the window, staring at the trembling glass as thunder cracked in the distance. He was 56, built from bone and work, the kind of man carved by winters and debt. His hair, once dark, had turned mostly silver. His beard was uneven, streaked with gray and white, and it framed a face that had forgotten how to smile easily. His eyes were gray-blue, tired eyes, watchful eyes, the kind that had seen too much leaving and not enough staying. He wore an old flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to scarred forearms that had spent a lifetime mending fences, fixing machines, and burying memories he didn't talk about. He reached down absently, fingers brushing against soft fur. Luna lay curled beside his boots. A German shepherd, 6 years old, her coat thick with shades of black and bronze. She wasn't a small dog, but she carried herself with quiet grace, every movement deliberate, aware. Her ears twitched at the thunder, her breath steady until suddenly it wasn't. In an instant, she lifted her head, muscles tensed, nose flaring toward the window. Ethan frowned. "What is it, girl?" Luna stood up, tail stiff, her body angled toward the door as though listening to something beyond the walls. Then came the sound, a faint cry that cut through the storm, half lost in the rain. Not human, not animal, something in between. The sound of distress. Luna barked, sharp and urgent, a single command to move. Ethan grabbed his coat and hat from the peg, heart pounding with the instinct of a man who had lived too long alone but couldn't ignore a cry for help. All right, I'm coming," he muttered. He pushed open the door, and the wind tore it from his grip. The rain hit his face like gravel. Luna leapt ahead, her paws splashing through mud and standing water, her body a blur of motion under the lightning flashes. The world outside was chaos, trees bent under the storm's rage, and the air smelled of wet pine and electricity. Ethan followed the sound of Luna's barks, his boots sinking into the earth with every step. He could barely see beyond the sheets of rain, but he trusted the rhythm of her voice, closer, then left, then ahead again. They reached the edge of the forest where the ground dipped toward a narrow gully. Luna stood there, soaked, teeth clenched around a tangle of fabric caught in the thorns. She tugged hard, growling low. Ethan knelt beside her, water streaming down his face, and gently freed the object from her jaws. It was a scarf, soft wool, dark green, the kind hand-knit with patience. Even in the storm's fury, he could see the name stitched in white thread across one end. Clara. Ethan blinked through the rain. The name stirred something faint, a memory from the feed store maybe, or church gatherings he no longer attended. "Where did you get this, girl?" he asked, but Luna only stared back, ears low, eyes flicking toward the dark woods beyond the gully, as if expecting something, or someone. He called out into the storm, his voice nearly swallowed by thunder. "Hello? Anyone out there?" Only wind and rain answered. Luna whined softly, still staring into the black trees. Ethan felt a chill deeper than the weather. Something about the way the scarf had been tangled, almost hidden, made him uneasy. It wasn't lost by accident. He turned back toward the cabin, scarf clutched in his fist. "Come on, girl. We'll figure this out in the morning." That night, the storm raged without pause. Ethan couldn't sleep. The scarf hung by the stove, dripping quietly, its embroidered name glowing faintly in the lamplight. He thought about the woman who might have worn it, Clara, maybe from the next valley, maybe from the small ranch by the creek. He remembered hearing of a widow who'd lost her husband 2 winters ago in a fall from his horse. She'd stopped coming into town much after that. People said she was kind, gentle, but carried her grief like a shawl she couldn't take off. By dawn, the rain had eased into fog. The valley below his cabin looked like a world half-born, soft and silver under the morning light. Luna waited by the door, tail thumping once, eyes bright, ready to finish what she had started. Ethan sighed and picked up the scarf. All right then, Luna. Let's return this. The road to the neighboring ranch wound through the wet grass and low clouds. When they reached the weathered gate marked Thompson Ranch, he saw the house. Small, pale yellow siding, smoke rising from the chimney, and rows of flowers still bravely standing despite the storm. A woman stepped out onto the porch. She was tall, slender but strong, in a way that came from working land alone. Her hair, a soft chestnut streaked with silver, was tied loosely at the back of her neck. She wore an old denim shirt tucked into faded jeans, her boots muddy from chores. There was kindness in her face, though sorrow lingered behind her green-gray eyes like a shadow she'd learned to live with. When she saw Ethan holding the scarf, her hand went to her mouth. "Where did you find that?" Ethan hesitated, suddenly self-conscious under her gaze. "My dog found it last night, out near the ridge. Thought maybe it belonged to you." She stepped closer, eyes misting. "It was my husband's last gift before he—" She stopped herself, looked away, then smiled faintly. "Before he passed." Ethan nodded, unsure what to say. "I'm sorry for your loss." She looked up then, meeting his eyes. "You came all the way through the storm just to bring it back?" He shrugged. "Wouldn't sit right keeping something that wasn't mine." Luna sat between them, tail wagging gently, as if approving the exchange. Clara reached down and scratched behind the dog's ear. "You're a good girl, aren't you?" she whispered. Luna leaned into her touch with a quiet sigh, a sound Ethan hadn't heard from her before. For a moment, none of them spoke. The clouds began to lift, and sunlight spilled across the wet grass. Clara looked back toward her porch and then at Ethan. "You should come in, warm up a bit." Ethan started to protest, but she smiled softly. "Coffee's better when it's shared." He followed her inside, awkward but grateful. The small house smelled of wood smoke and lavender soap. Photographs lined the mantel, a man with kind eyes and a broad smile, standing beside Clara years younger. Ethan paused, hat in hand, feeling like he'd stepped into someone else's unfinished story. As Clara poured the coffee, Luna wandered toward the back door and barked once, sharp and short, the kind of bark that said she'd seen something. Both humans turned toward her. "Probably just a rabbit," Ethan said, but his voice sounded uncertain even to him. Clara tilted her head, frowning slightly. "Rabbits don't move that fast." Outside, beyond the fog-thinned trees, something shifted. A flicker of movement where no one should be. Luna's ears pricked forward, body rigid. Ethan set his cup down slowly. "Stay here," he murmured. He reached for the door handle as the wind rose again, carrying with it the faint, distant echo of another bark, one that didn't belong to Luna. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Chapter 2. Footprints in the Red Earth. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the kind of light that made even familiar hills look foreign. Mist still clung to the grass, and the world smelled faintly of pine and wet earth. Ethan Miller stepped out onto his porch, coffee steaming in his hand, his breath forming small clouds in the chill. Luna was gone. He hadn't heard her leave, and that in itself was unusual. The dog never went far without checking back. He waited, scanning the ridge where fog slid between trees like restless spirits. Then he saw her, a dark shape trotting down from the hill, tail low but moving with purpose. When she reached the yard, Ethan frowned. Her paws were caked in reddish mud, thick and sticky, the color of rusted iron, soil that didn't belong anywhere near his ranch. The ground here was all gray loam and granite dust. He crouched, wiping one paw gently with his rough thumb. The smell was sharp, mineral, almost metallic. Luna's fur bore thin scratches along her flanks, the kind that came from squeezing through brush or rocks. "What the hell have you been into, girl?" Ethan muttered. Luna only looked up at him, her amber eyes bright with something he couldn't name. Urgency, perhaps even insistence. She trotted to the edge of the porch and glanced toward the northern ridge, the direction of the narrow canyons where no one went anymore. It was wild country, steep, rocky, home to bears and bad memories. Ethan had no intention of going up there, at least not until Luna went back a second time that afternoon, and returned again with the same red mud and the same anxious energy. She whined when he didn't follow, pacing the porch, ears swiveling toward the ridge as though listening to a voice only she could hear. By noon, Ethan had saddled his old bay mare, Rosie, a mare with more ribs showing than he liked, but still steady under pressure. He told himself it was just a short ride, to see what had Luna so stirred. But when he reached Clara's ranch gate, he found her already outside tending to a line of laundry, swaying in the wind. Clara Thompson was a picture of quiet resilience that morning. Sleeves rolled to the elbow, her chestnut hair pulled into a loose braid that revealed streaks of silver glinting in the pale light. Her skin, tanned by sun and softened by age, glowed against the crisp blue of her flannel shirt. She smiled faintly when she saw him. "You're up early, Mr. Miller. Don't tell me Luna's dragged you into another adventure." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, feeling oddly caught. "Something like that. She found red clay this morning. Don't know where from." Clara's brow furrowed. "Red clay? There's none of that around here. Closest I've seen is up near Hollow Ridge." Her expression shifted, a flicker of worry beneath her calm surface. "You're not thinking of going up there, are you?" "Thinking, maybe," Ethan said. Carefully, she put down her laundry pin and faced him fully, arms folded. "That place isn't safe. The ground up there is unstable. My husband used to talk about it, said old mining shafts ran under that whole ridge like veins. He almost lost a horse there once." Ethan nodded, gaze turning toward the north again. "Luna's fixated on something. Won't rest." Clara sighed. "Sometimes dogs chase ghosts, Ethan." He met her eyes. Soft, green-gray, but filled with something worse deeper than suspicion. "Sometimes they find what people are too scared to look for." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just promise me you'll be careful." The road toward Hollow Ridge wound through broken fences and thick stands of cedar. The air grew cooler as he climbed, and the scent of iron grew stronger. Luna trotted ahead, pausing every few yards to glance back, as if making sure Ethan was keeping up. She moved like she knew exactly where she was going. An hour later, they reached the edge of a dry creek bed. The red soil was unmistakable, rich, deep, unnatural among the pale Wyoming stone. Ethan dismounted, knelt, and ran his fingers through it. It stained his skin, left a faint shimmer when the light hit. He frowned. "This isn't just mud." He rubbed it between his thumb and forefinger. Fine, almost powdery, like ground brick or crushed rock. Luna barked once, sharply, and bounded toward a cluster of pines clinging to the slope. Ethan followed, pushing through branches until the trees opened into a small clearing he'd never seen before. There, half hidden under brush and vines, lay what looked like the collapsed mouth of an old mine. The timber supports were blackened and rotten, one side caved in. Rusted tools lay scattered, a pickaxe, a tin lamp, a length of chain. The smell was metallic and faintly sweet, like old copper in decay. Luna sniffed the ground, tail low, ears pricked. She pawed at the dirt near the collapsed entrance and whined softly. Ethan crouched beside her. "Easy, girl." He brushed aside loose soil and uncovered the edge of something solid, weathered wood, carved with letters almost worn away. He could make out only part of it. Tomp. He froze. "Clara," he whispered. He stared at the name for a long time, rain beginning to patter through the trees again. How could her name be here, on an abandoned mine that must have been sealed decades ago? He straightened as Luna's growl rumbled low in her throat. She was staring toward the ridgeline again, hackles rising. Ethan turned just in time to see a figure moving through the fog, distant, slow, but unmistakably human. The person paused, watching them, then turned and disappeared into the trees. Ethan felt his pulse thudding. "Who the hell?" He strained to listen, but only the rain answered. Luna barked once and bolted forward a few steps, then stopped when he called her back. "No, girl. Not this time." He tightened his jaw, uneasy. The wind carried the faint sound of metal striking stone, a single echo that died as quickly as it came. Someone was up there. By the time Ethan rode back to Clara's that evening, dusk had swallowed the valley. She met him at the gate, worry plain on her face. "You went, didn't you?" He nodded. "Found the red clay, and something else, an old mine entrance, with your name on the beam." Clara's breath caught. "My name?" Half of it, anyway, looked carved in by hand. For a moment she said nothing. Then she stepped back, her face pale. "That mine. My grandfather used to tell stories about it. Said it was part of our land once, before the company bought everything. He said people disappeared up there." Ethan studied her carefully. "You ever go yourself?" She shook her head slowly. "No. My husband did once, years ago. He came back shaken, wouldn't talk about it. Just said the place wasn't right." They stood there in silence, the fading light painting long shadows across the ground. Luna sat between them, her fur still dusted with red clay. She lifted her head suddenly, ears turning toward the north again. Ethan followed her gaze and thought he saw, for just an instant, a flicker of light far up the ridge where no one should be. Clara saw it too. "Did you—" "I did." Ethan's voice was low. "Looks like someone's working up there." "Working or hiding," she murmured. Luna growled softly, eyes locked on the distant glow. Ethan laid a hand on her back. "Tomorrow," he said quietly. "We'll go back tomorrow." But as the night deepened and the wind shifted, carrying that strange metallic scent through the valley once more, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that whatever waited at Hollow Ridge hadn't been asleep at all. It had been waiting. Chapter 3. The door behind the falls. The following days blurred into a restless rhythm of waiting. The glow they had seen on the ridge never appeared again, but it lingered in Ethan's mind like a whisper he couldn't shake. Luna was uneasy too, pacing the porch at dusk, nose lifted toward the wind as if she could still smell the metallic tang of that red soil. Clara came by more often now, bringing fresh bread or excuses about checking the fence line, though Ethan knew it wasn't the fence she was worried about. By the fourth morning, Luna disappeared again. When she returned, her fur was soaked and clumped, her paws once more dusted with that same red clay. But this time, Ethan noticed the faint scent of moss and rushing water. He crouched beside her, running his hand along her flank. "Waterfall?" he murmured, glancing north toward the canyons. Luna barked once, sharp, decisive, as if confirming it. Clara was waiting when he rode into her yard. She was wearing a thick wool sweater over her work shirt, sleeves pushed up, hands stained with garden soil. Despite the cold, there was color in her cheeks. Her eyes softened when she saw Luna trotting beside him. "She's been restless again," Clara said quietly. "I can feel it in her. Something's pulling her up there." Ethan nodded. "Then I reckon we follow." She hesitated. "If it's the same place my grandfather warned about, then maybe it's time someone stopped being afraid of it," Ethan replied. They rode together toward Hollow Ridge, the trail narrowing between pines and granite walls slick with lichen. The morning fog clung low, curling around their horses' legs like smoke. Luna led the way, her movement steady, certain. After several hours, the path dipped into a narrow gorge where the air grew cooler, filled with the constant muted roar of water. The sound guided them forward until the trees opened into a hollow, and there it was. The waterfall wasn't grand, but it had presence. It spilled from a cleft in the rock about 30 feet high, fanning into a misty veil before crashing into a shallow pool below. The air shimmered with droplets that caught the sun like glass dust. Ferns grew thick around the edges, their fronds trembling in the spray. Luna approached the pool and barked twice, pacing along the bank before plunging halfway into the water. "Easy," Ethan called, but the dog ignored him. She was focused on the cascade itself, circling it, sniffing the stone. Then she stopped, pressing her nose to a dark patch behind the falling water. Ethan followed, wading knee-deep until the cold bit into his legs. When he pushed aside a curtain of vines, he saw it. A small, jagged opening just wide enough for a man to crawl through. "Clara," he said over his shoulder, "you might want to see this." She dismounted, boots crunching over gravel as she came closer. The spray dampened her hair, loosening the braid until chestnut strands clung to her face. Her breath caught as she saw the gap. "It's a passage," she whispered. Ethan tested the edge with his hand. Slick stone, cold and smooth. "Looks natural, maybe widened over time. Or carved," Clara said quietly. "There were stories. Settlers used to build hideouts in the cliffs during the company wars. My grandfather said they stored supplies in hidden places so the mining men couldn't take them." Ethan met her gaze. "Guess your grandfather wasn't lying." He squeezed through first, water dripping down his back, Luna close behind. Inside, the roar of the waterfall dulled to a muffled heartbeat. The tunnel curved sharply, leading into a small cavern lit by faint, filtered light from the water outside. The air smelled of stone and age, tinged with the faint sweetness of decay. Clara followed last, her boots scraping softly on the damp floor. The cave wasn't large, no more than a dozen paces across, but it held something unexpected. Against one wall, partly buried in sediment, rested an old wooden chest. Its iron fittings were rusted, and moss crept along the edges. Nearby lay a pile of rotted timbers that might once have been shelves, and an overturned lantern, its glass still intact beneath a coat of dust. Ethan knelt, brushing the grime from the chest. The wood was soft, but when he pried it open, the hinges groaned and gave. Inside, under layers of brittle cloth, lay papers bound with twine, a few small books, and a folded map sealed with wax long since cracked. The smell rising from them was dry and old, paper, ink, and time. Clara dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she lifted the map. It was drawn in careful ink strokes, faded but legible, a series of boundary lines, creeks, and land divisions labeled in ornate handwriting. She traced one name with her fingertip, her voice breaking. "Thompson, this is my grandfather's signature." Ethan leaned closer. "These look like property deeds." He unfolded another sheet, reading aloud fragments in formal looping script. "Transfer of ownership, under advisement of the Silver Vein Mining Company. Compensation to be determined." He stopped, brow tightening. "They forced him out." Clara's eyes shimmered in the dim light. "He told my father they came with papers and threats. Said they'd close the wells if he didn't sign." Ethan turned another document, revealing a handwritten journal beneath. Its leather cover was cracked, but the ink inside had been protected by the cave's dry air. The first page bore a date, May 3rd, 1902. Below it, in careful penmanship, "For my daughter and her children, should this ever reach them." Clara took it gently, as if it might break in her hands. The words that followed were personal, aching. "They say it's progress, but progress built on lies can't stand forever. I hide this not for myself, but for those who will come. After, may they find the truth we were denied." Her tears fell silently onto the page. Ethan reached out, resting his rough hand over hers. "Clara, this proves your family was robbed." She nodded, swallowing hard. "My grandfather wasn't just a miner. He owned half this valley. They took it all. Every acre." Luna stirred then, padding toward a deeper corner of the cave. Her nails clicked softly against the stone. She sniffed, then gave a sharp bark, pawing at the wall. Ethan grabbed the lantern, lighting it with a match from his pocket. The glow revealed a faded carving, initials etched into the rock. R.T., 1902. "Robert Thompson," Clara whispered. "My grandfather." Ethan exhaled, the weight of the moment pressing deep into his chest. "He wanted you to find this." Clara turned to him, tears still glistening, but her voice steady now. "Or maybe Luna did." The dog wagged her tail, then sat, watching them both with patient eyes. Outside, thunder rolled distantly across the mountains, echoing through the cavern like a promise finally answered. Ethan squeezed Clara's hand, his rough fingers brushing against hers. "Seems she's found the truth for you, Clara. And maybe for me, too." Clara looked up, a faint, trembling smile breaking through the grief. "For both of us." For a long moment, they sat in silence, surrounded by the ghosts of history and the steady pulse of the waterfall beyond. Luna lay between them, her head resting on her paws, her eyes closing slowly, as if she knew her work wasn't finished, only begun. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and iron. Somewhere above the ridge, a shadow moved briefly across the rocks, unseen by the pair in the cave, and then was gone. Chapter 4. The Man Behind the Mountain. The air in the valley had changed. It wasn't the weather this time, though clouds gathered low above the ridge as if holding their breath. It was the stillness, the kind that comes before a storm not of nature, but of men. Ethan Miller stood by the hitching post outside Clara's house, tightening the saddle straps on Rosie. Luna waited beside him, one paw still bandaged from a scrape she'd gotten near the cave. Her ears were pricked, alert to every sound. Clara came out of the house holding a small tin box wrapped in cloth. Inside it were the documents they'd found, the deeds, the letters, and the old journal. "We'll take these to the county office today," she said. Her voice trembled slightly, but her jaw was set. She wore a simple brown coat, buttoned to her neck, her hair tied back with a faded ribbon. The morning light caught the faint silver strands near her temples. She looked like someone who'd carried more loss than most and had finally decided to stop running from it. Ethan gave a small nod. "We'll be careful." They rode out just after sunrise, heading toward town. The path wound along the river, still swollen from the week's rain. Birds called overhead, but Luna's low growl stopped Ethan mid-sentence. She turned, ears flicking toward the ridge. Ethan looked back, movement in the trees, too deliberate to be wind. "Clara," he said quietly, "keep riding." But it was too late. 3 men emerged from the tree line, their coats dark, their horses heavier than ranch stock. The one in front raised a hand. "Morning," he said. His voice was smooth, the kind used to closing deals that hurt people. He was tall, built like a man who had once done hard labor but had long since stopped. His face bore a short beard, trimmed neat, streaked with gray. His eyes, cold blue, had none of the land's kindness in them. "You're Ethan Miller, I reckon. And this must be Miss Thompson." Clara stiffened. "Who are you?" He tipped his hat slightly. "Name's Daniel Briggs. I represent Silver Vein Industries." He said it like a priest might say, "the Lord." Behind him, two younger men, both broad-shouldered, their faces half hidden under brims, sat silently, their rifles slung across their backs. Ethan's grip tightened on the reins. "Silver Vein went out of business a century ago." Briggs smiled. "Oh, the name survived. Changed hands, like most things. We own a bit more now. The mine, the valley, and soon, I expect, the land you two are standing on." Clara's voice shook. "That land was stolen from my grandfather." Briggs leaned forward in his saddle, his tone soft, almost kind. "Now, Miss Thompson, that's a mighty dangerous word. Stolen. Paper can get lost, fires can happen, and sometimes people find things they shouldn't." His eyes slid toward the saddlebag on Ethan's horse. "Why don't you hand over what you found? And we can all forget this little misunderstanding." Ethan stared him down. "You send men into the mountains to follow us?" Briggs's smile didn't falter. "I send men everywhere. It's my job to know when someone digs where they shouldn't." He nodded slightly to one of the riders. The man shifted, hand moving toward his rifle. Luna barked, a sound sharp enough to make the horses rear. In that instant, Ethan grabbed Clara's arm. "Ride!" The woods exploded with motion, hooves pounding, shouts echoing off the cliffs. Clara clung to her reins as Rosie bolted down the slope, mud flying beneath them. Behind them came gunfire, not close, but close enough. Ethan felt the wind of a bullet whip past his shoulder. Luna ran alongside, weaving between trees, her body low, sure-footed. They reached the river crossing, swollen and fast. "We can't make it!" Clara shouted. "We don't have a choice!" Ethan urged his horse forward, water splashing high as they crossed. On the far side, Luna yelped, a cry that cut through the noise like a knife. Ethan turned just in time to see her stumble, blood dark against her fur. "Luna!" he shouted, dismounting. She limped but didn't stop. Her eyes met his, steady, fierce, unwilling to give in. She turned her head toward the ridge behind them and barked once, insistent. Ethan understood. The cave. They moved quickly, following the stream toward the waterfall. The roar grew louder until it drowned out the pursuit. Clara's face was pale but determined. "They'll find us," she gasped. "Not if Luna's right," Ethan said. When they reached the falls, the mist shrouded everything in silver haze. Luna darted through the pool, disappearing behind the curtain of water. Ethan helped Clara down, their boots slipping on slick stone. They crawled through the narrow gap into the cave, the familiar darkness swallowing them whole. Inside, the sound of the waterfall became a heartbeat again, steady, relentless. Ethan tore a strip from his shirt and bound Luna's shoulder, his hands shaking only slightly. "You're all right, girl," he murmured. The dog pressed her muzzle against his arm, eyes half closed, but still alert. Clara sat near the chest they had opened days before, the lantern light casting tremors across her face. "Ethan," she whispered, "they'll kill us for this." He looked at her, really looked, past the fear. "Then we make sure it means something." Her eyes filled, but her voice steadied. "If I lose the land again, so be it. I won't lose the truth." Outside, voices echoed faintly. Men shouting, searching. Ethan doused the lantern, leaving them in darkness. The only sound was the waterfall and Luna's breathing. Briggs's voice drifted faintly from beyond the veil of water. "You can't hide forever, Miller. This valley belongs to us." Ethan clenched his fists. "Not anymore," he whispered. Hours passed, before the noise faded. When they finally stepped out, night had fallen. The sky glowed faintly red beyond the ridge, as if the mountain itself was burning. Clara leaned against him, exhausted. "They'll come back," she said. "I know," he replied, "but next time, we won't just be running." Luna limped beside them, her steps slow but sure. Her fur shimmered in the moonlight, streaked with mud and blood and rain, the marks of a battle not yet won. Ethan glanced toward the ridge, where shadows still moved faintly against the fire-lit horizon. The fight wasn't over. But as he looked down at Clara's trembling hand in his, and at the dog walking faithfully at his side, he realized something deeper than fear had taken root inside him. Maybe this wasn't just about land or justice anymore. Maybe it was about love, the kind that makes a man stand when everything else tells him to run. Somewhere behind them, the wind carried a faint echo, Briggs's voice again, or maybe just the mountain itself whispering a warning. Either way, Ethan didn't look back. Chapter 5. Dawn over the Second Chance Ranch. The trial took weeks, but in the end, truth held longer than greed. The courtroom in Laramie smelled faintly of old wood and ink, its tall windows letting in pale winter light. Ethan sat at the back with his hat in his lap, boots dusted clean for the first time in years. Clara sat beside him, calm yet trembling slightly, her hands folded tightly around the tin box that had become their talisman. Inside it, her grandfather's journal and the deeds that had changed everything. Across the aisle sat Daniel Briggs, now stripped of his corporate smile, his suit wrinkled, his confidence cracking. The man looked older, the arrogance drained from his eyes. When the judge's gavel came down and the words were spoken, "The land in dispute is hereby restored to its rightful heir, Clara Thompson," Ethan felt something he hadn't known he was missing: relief, clean and quiet. Weeks later, spring came early to the valley. Snow retreated from the hills, revealing grass that glimmered like new glass under the morning sun. The air was soft, carrying the scent of sage and thawing earth. Clara stood on the porch of her newly restored ranch house. Their ranch now, with a hammer in hand and a streak of paint on her cheek. She had traded her court dress for denim and flannel again, her hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck. She looked younger, or maybe lighter, as though victory had lifted more than just her burden. Ethan worked near the corral, mending the last of the posts. His beard had grown a bit thicker, but the weariness in his eyes had softened into something gentler. He'd been offered work back in town, but he'd turned it down. He preferred this. The sound of wood splitting, the sight of horses grazing, and the low hum of Clara's laughter when Luna tried to chase her own tail in the dirt. Luna herself had recovered fully, though the faint scar on her shoulder caught the light when she ran. She was stronger now, her coat gleaming with health, her gait steady and proud. "Careful, Miller," Clara called, her tone teasing. "If you keep that fence too straight, the horses won't know where to stop." Ethan glanced over, smiling faintly. "That's so? Maybe they'll appreciate the change. The old fence was crooked enough to embarrass a drunkard." She laughed, a sound he hadn't realized he needed until he heard it often. "Come, have breakfast before the coffee burns," she said. He wiped his hands on his jeans, walking toward the porch. Luna trotted behind him, tail wagging. Clara poured coffee into 2 tin mugs and handed him one. "It still feels strange," she said softly. "After all this time, this land being ours again." Ethan sipped, nodding. "Strange, maybe, but right." She gazed out at the hills, eyes glistening with quiet pride. "I keep thinking about my grandfather, how he must have hidden those papers, hoping someone would find them. I wish he could see it now." "He does," Ethan said simply. "Places like this remember." Luna barked once, as if agreeing, then wandered toward the barn, where a new resident stirred. A young bay colt, rescued from a neighbor who couldn't afford to feed it. The animal was thin, its ribs faintly visible beneath the glossy coat, but it lifted its head when Luna approached. The dog stopped a few feet away, tail wagging slowly. The colt snorted, curious rather than afraid. Clara smiled at the sight. "Looks like she's already got a new recruit." Ethan chuckled. "She's got a way of finding lost things. Guess that includes horses." They had decided to turn the ranch into a rescue, the Second Chance Homestead. The name had been Clara's idea, though Ethan suspected Luna had inspired it. They took in strays from nearby counties, a half-blind shepherd, 3 barn cats, and an old mule with more stubbornness than teeth. Each animal that arrived seemed to bring a new kind of healing to the land and to the people who tended it. That afternoon, as they worked side by side rebuilding the old barn, a truck pulled up along the dirt road. The man who stepped out was short and solidly built, with a sun-weathered face and kind eyes that missed little. His name was Sheriff Hank Dorset, a longtime local who had helped them during the court case. Hank wore his uniform like a second skin, clean but scuffed, his badge dull from years of use. "Morning, folks," he greeted, voice gravelly but friendly. "Heard you two are starting a sanctuary? Figured I'd drop by before some fool tries to drop off his wife's cat without asking first. Clara laughed, shaking his hand. We'll take anything with a heartbeat, Sheriff. Though I'm not sure about the husbands. Hank grinned. Fair enough. Anyway, figured you should know. Briggs is headed back east. Word is, he sold off what was left of Silver Vein. Won't be coming around here no more. Ethan nodded. Good riddance. Just watch your back, all the same, the sheriff said gently. Men like that don't always stay buried. Then his gaze softened as he looked toward Luna lying under the porch. That's a fine animal you've got there. Looks like she's earned her keep. Ethan's expression warmed. She saved my life more times than I can count. Hank tipped his hat. You keep her close. There's a reason God made dogs before lawyers. He winked, climbed back into his truck, and drove off down the dusty road. As the sun dipped lower, the world took on a golden hue. Ethan and Clara sat on the porch steps, shoulders nearly touching. Luna stretched out between them. The sky blazed orange and pink, and the valley below shimmered with the light of a day finally at peace. Clara turned toward him, her voice soft but steady. Do you ever think about what would have happened if Luna hadn't found that scarf? Ethan smiled, faintly, his gaze following the horizon. I'd probably still be fixing fences for folks who don't even know my name. And you'd still be fighting ghosts. She looked down at Luna, sleeping contentedly at their feet. Maybe she wasn't looking for that scarf at all. Maybe she was looking for us. Ethan nodded. Maybe she was. He hesitated, then reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from Clara's cheek. If it wasn't for her, I'd have never found you. Or myself. Clara's eyes met his, the kind of look that didn't need words. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything they'd survived, everything they'd built. Luna stirred, her ears twitching as the first light of dawn crept back over the mountains. The golden beams touched the ranch, the barn, the corral, the half-built kennels, and for a moment, everything glowed. 3 lives, 1 man, 1 woman, and 1 faithful dog, standing on land that had been stolen and reclaimed, scarred and healed. Ethan exhaled softly. Looks like we finally made it home. And as the wind swept gently across the hills, carrying the scent of hay and new beginnings, Luna raised her head, watching the sunrise as if guarding it for them all. As the sun rose over the Second Chance Ranch, light spilled across the valley. Soft, golden, alive. Ethan, Clara, and Luna stood beneath it, no longer haunted by what was lost, but grateful for what was found. Sometimes, God doesn't send angels in white robes. He sends them with fur, muddy paws, and hearts so pure they remind us what faith truly means. Luna wasn't just a dog. She was a miracle with 4 legs, proof that when we would follow love, even through storms and shadows, we find our way home. So, tonight as you close your eyes, remember, the Lord's blessings often come quietly, in the wag of a tail, the kindness of a stranger, or the sunrise after a long night. Trust His timing, believe in second chances. May God bless you and all the loyal hearts that walk beside you. If this story touched your soul, please share it so others can feel that light too. Leave a comment below. Tell us about the animal or moment that reminded you of God's grace. And don't forget to subscribe for more true heartwarming stories that celebrate faith, love, and the quiet miracles around us every day.